I'm very excited to be here. This is my first real time in Prague. I say real time because I was here for about 3 hours last summer on my way in and out from a wedding. So this is my first time really getting to spend some time in Prague, and I'm so taken away by the beauty of this city. So far we're having a really good time, so I'm thrilled that, thank you to Laura, Donna, and Martin, wherever you are, for inviting us to this conference in your beautiful city.
Yeah, it's, I said if I had a reason for living, I would. I don't have a reason, but it's beautiful here. Like if you you just tilt your head up and you see, even here, there's details that you can spend hours looking at. So yeah, I would agree, it's beautiful.
So as Loredana said, we're a couple, which you're starting to sense a theme.
It's a lot of couples.
I don't know what that says. I guess if you learn this understanding of the mind, you just accidentally fall in love with whoever's in front of you. Because that seems to be what happened to all of us. I think there's another couple coming later. No, but we met through this work. So I met Eirik when Aaron and I were teaching on Michael's program, who you saw Michael earlier this morning. And so that's how we met, and then, fell in love, and then started to do this work together. And we've had a really interesting journey over just the last year, and exploring how this understanding of the mind that we're talking about with you guys today and tomorrow actually has huge implications for world problems. And the more I've looked in the direction of, is it possible that this understanding of the mind offers a solution to some of the biggest global challenges that we face today, I've been surprised to discover that the answer is yes. And we kind of wanted to explore that on stage with you today, because I know for me, prior to learning this understanding of the mind and then seeing how it helped individuals and seeing how it helped relationships, like you saw George and Linda discuss earlier, and then spending 7 years working alongside Aaron, working in organizations and showing how this completely transforms a business culture, and then what's possible in terms of that business's productivity, seeing how it helps professional athletes, seeing how it helps prison inmates, it just started to dawn on me, is this actually the one solution to everything? I didn't think there was such a thing in life. But now that we've been looking in the direction of bigger global challenges, I've been delighted to discover, yes, it's also true there. And that was really good news to me, because I was someone who found watching the news, reading the newspapers, seeing the state of the world as often disappointing, depressing, overwhelming, seemingly too big to handle, like that thought of like, where do you even start? So part of the reason why we've founded One Solution and are doing what we're doing is because we feel it offers a really hopeful answer to that feeling. So hopefully by the end of our talk, you'll have a sense that the world has got a solution right under its nose.
Yeah, and I was kind of the opposite of Mara. I didn't really care about the world. That's what I would say. And but when, it's basically a year ago, maybe a little bit more, when I saw what Mara said, that if what Michael said at the first talk, that every human being, all 7 billion people work this way, it's the solution to all 7 billion people's problems. So before that, I was more worried about my problems and what I saw about the mind, and then it was like the people around me, my friends, my family, people I work with, and then it was like, all right, maybe I'll scale it up to an organization or a community. But to think that if what we're saying is true, that the mind works the same way everywhere, in Prague, in Oslo, in Japan, in the United States, in Argentina, it works the same way. If that's true, then then that shows the same hope that I think both of us saw with ourselves, which is that we kind of jumped into a new level of well-being, a new level of clarity, and we're going to talk more about what became obvious that wasn't obvious before, that just didn't make sense. And we're going to show how that plays out on a global scale, that there's stuff that people are doing now that when we look at it, we think, that doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? And that's the before version of us too. We did stuff that basically hurt ourselves, but when we realize something new, it just doesn't make sense anymore. And we want to show how that happened kind of to us personally, but how that can happen in a global scale. So I'm happy to finally care about something else than myself. And the way we wanted to do it, just to mix it up, was to do like a mini interview of each other and then hand it over to you if there's any questions you want, because this might be a new topic. And the cool thing about asking questions about something big as the world, as you start to see that the world is a metaphor for you. So when you see that if this works everywhere, it must also work this way for myself. So it will help you personally as well.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask Eirik 2 questions, and then he's going to ask me.
5.
No, 2.
I don't know.
He's
What's
getting
the 2
greedy.
questions?
He doesn't know what the 2 questions. Well, there might be other questions that we fill in, but we really want to cover 2 simple things, and then we'd love to hear what questions you have of us. So, the first question I would like to hear from you, Mr. Olsen.
It's very formal now.
Yes, I'm interviewing you. Is how did this understanding of the mind change you?
The way I would explain it, and it might be different than other way people explain it, but it just affected me. So in the way that I heard people talk about, like people we were talking about on stage here, and I just felt over a period of time, the more I listened to it, that I started changing. And I started behaving differently, I started talking differently, I started being differently, I started building different relationships. I quit the work I was doing. I took more care of myself. I got less stressed. There was all stuff that just happened automatically. And it wasn't until later that I realized, or I think I know what happened. But that's how what I think happened to me is that those things just started changing. And for me, it was a very automatic process in a way. And then I started realizing, oh, I don't think about that stuff anymore. I don't stress myself out. I don't care as much how I'm looking. I don't care about achievements as much. I don't stress about the stuff I do. And then I realized, oh, I've spent a lot of time being self-obsessed, stressful, trying to fix something with myself that I realized wasn't wrong. I started thinking, creating stuff, and it's kind of like I explain it as a headache that disappeared that I didn't know I had. And a level of weight that to me was normal. But once it disappeared, I realized that's not normal. This is my new normal. And in fact, I can keep kind of removing weight from myself, removing limitations. Like there's infinite levels of seeing more, but it shifted direction of like, this is normal. You're supposed to feel this stress, this weight, this pressure, this constant fight of being someone or trying to achieve something. I thought that was normal, and it helped me. And when it disappeared, I realized it's not, like what I have done is actually in spite of all I did. And I thought it was because I did all of that I was able to do what I did. But I was just holding myself back.
And what do you think it was that you heard? I mean, I know the way you described it, it sounds like it was almost invisible or automatic.
Yeah.
But what is it that you think you absorbed that accounted for that change in you?
Well, the best explanation I think what happened is that I realized that there was like, life is an automatic thing. I know I realized that I had tried to manually make stuff happen in the world and manually try to change myself. And when I realized that basically what Michael said, that we're kind of hooked up to a system, we have this universal intelligence, that kind of told me, like, you self-absorbed little piece of blank, you're not the boss of this, and basically you're not well suited to do this. You think you are, because you're arrogant, but you're not. You're not well suited for it. What is suited for it is an automatic happening where, like, basically my life happens and my internal state happens, and I can just be in that, be in life and be in my state and see what happens. So that I know I realized that it's automatic, like it's not up to you.
So it sounds like you kind of went from being in a whole bunch of working on things in your thinking,
Yeah.
to just sort of realizing there was something more automatic, more powerful, more intelligent, and you kind of relaxed into that and forgot about this?
No, it's kind of opposite. It just became automatic, and then I saw, oh, it's happening by itself. Before you did all of this, but now it's just happening on itself. And then I saw, oh, it's meant to be that way. That's how it works.
So explain to me how this realization that you had for yourself translates to what you now see in the world differently.
Well, the first thing that happened was that I saw that the whole world is the same ecosystem that I am. That if the world has everything it needs to work, I have everything it needs to work. And the only thing that's getting in the way of me is my thinking. And the only thing that's getting in the way of the world, automatically adjusting itself, automatically like doing what nature does, is collective thinking, or as I said, the 7 billion people versions of thinking. Mm-hmm. So I realized if I'm the one that's stopping me from that then all the other people was doing the same, and we're living in the result of that. So it helped me. Like, if this helped me, it could help anybody, and then we will literally live in a different world, which is what happened to me. Like, when I don't carry that weight, it's literally a different world. I don't feel like I live in the same world now. Mm-hmm. It's more hopeful, more positive, more solution-oriented. So that's what I would say, that everything is here. All the world's resources are here right now. We have the amount of energy, we have the money, we have the food, we have the plants, we have the animals. Like, everything is here, but our thinking is complicating it. And we can talk more about that, but that doesn't let that just happen. Mm-hmm. So we're blocking it basically with human thought.
And can you give me some examples of that, like in real things in the world right now?
Yeah.
How it would look different?
Well, the best example I would use is what George and Linda was talking about in the last session. When they told, I don't know if you realize that, if you remember this, but when they talked about that extreme fight where everything almost went south, like they were about to divorce each other, and that to me, I just thought, oh, that could happen. That could happen with countries, and it's almost like, you know, it would be North Korea and Trump, and they would be like, oh no, this and that, and I'm gonna bomb you, and you're gonna bomb me, and then they just would wake up and realize how made up it is. And they would call each other like, oh God, we almost bombed each other last night. What was that? What kind of mood were we in now? Like, what happened? And it sounds ridiculous, but that's the only difference between going to war and not going to war, is somebody kind of seeing it before they do it and stop themselves. And that's the same like going to war or picking a fight, or two politicians who are against each other. They don't even want to go against each other. They just made up like we're politicians and we're supposed to be in opposition. And they have to kind of like morally disagree even if they do. But what I saw, if like the two politicians would be the same as George and Linda, they would listen to each other. And when one say like, I think we should put money behind education, and the other say, no, I think we should put money behind building railroads. And then this guy would say, oh, maybe, what is it about education? Maybe there's like, I don't know, what is it about education or what is it about railroads? And then they would figure it out. I think it could revamp the whole political system. Everything we're based on right now would reorganize, because it wouldn't make sense to agree to disagree. It wouldn't make sense to be against each other. Mm-hmm. So I think what George and Linda did, you just see like, no, we're committed to figuring things out and getting over ourselves. Well, if countries and political parties and religions could have their stance, but they could listen and be open and figure out common good, then it would solve everything without anything needing to change. Like, you could keep your religion, you could keep your stance, you could keep your way of being, but we could coexist. Mm-hmm. But if I blame you, that's not possible. If I think you're causing my experience, or you're wrong, or you can't do anything, we can't coexist. So it just makes separation not make sense, and have us kind of join forces, which is what everyone's trying to do. But understanding how we really work and how that's natural is what I see is kind of the only solution to really make that happen. Mm-hmm. Not as a like, come on, we gotta be, about oneness, but like really, oneness is an experience, and it can only be experienced through like us actually feeling it. Mm-hmm. Like, I actually see that we're the same. It cannot be a theory, and that would obliterate all the racial issues, all the inequality issues.
That's what I thought was so interesting listening to them, was that idea that if you understand your own capacity to get over your feelings from the inside out, instead of needing everything out here to be just so, to be fixed just right for you to feel okay, that capacity to take accountability for feeling from within you is what allows them to have a commitment to goodwill in their relationship. And I love George set it up in the beginning. It's like, if you don't have goodwill, and you don't understand that that comes from you getting over your own upset feeling and seeing it as coming from you, then the other alternative is just conflict and adversarial relationships. And if you look at the state of the world today, exactly like Eirik just described, we're trapped in a misunderstanding of the mind that has us living in adversarial relationships as the way of operating. The operating model in the world right now is adversarial. It's my religion versus your religion, my political party versus your political party, my race versus your race, my gender versus your gender, and everyone, exactly like they described, is looking after their position. Whereas it's so fascinating, and I know I loved what you said, it's like, I know it sounds ridiculous, but often the things that have the potential to truly reorganize the world are ridiculous at first. Otherwise, they wouldn't be that powerful, right? Like, if we're talking about something that would create an absolute across-the-board shift in how humanity is operating, we might have to consider that it's as simple and ridiculous as what George and Linda realized as a couple being realized on a larger human scale, on a global scale. That what if our operating model as a species was goodwill? And to your point, that just sounds like a great idea in theory if you don't have any operating principles to back that up and give people a logic of how to do that. And essentially, when George and Linda learned these principles of the mind, that became their, to use Michael's metaphor, operating manual for how to do that. Is I had to see that I was living in my own thinking and assuming my thinking was superior and right. How many of us do that? I remember one of my close friends in college said to me, like a whisper, she's like, do you ever think you're the only one who's not crazy? Like, that assumption that the thinking we have is somehow right and superior, and therefore everyone else is a little bit nuts or wrong, is so tempting as a human. But I love the point that you're pointing to. Is like, what if it was that simple? As ridiculous as it might sound, is people realizing I'm just a thinker. It doesn't make me right. And if I'm interested in creating a more harmonious relationship with my partner, or a more harmonious business that can therefore be more productive because it has less of the distraction of adversary, and a world that has less of the distraction and the subsequent violence and problems and poverty that comes out of that adversarial relationship. What if it really is that simple of a shift of realizing that it has to come from my own mind? And that's why I was curious, like, what was it that you saw in you that you see in the world differently? Because I think for both of us, we had to see it for ourselves first. You can't see it in the world if you don't see it for yourself, right?
Yeah, and I think that we had a recent example when we were in Chicago, and we were talking with this. Remember Dejan? We were talking with. Basically, he was 16 years old, right?
Yeah, 16-year-old in Southside Chicago.
And he was basically explaining to us the logic that the gang members are working on. So they're
because he comes from a family of gang leaders.
Yeah, his family are gang leaders, and he knows a lot of people in gangs. And he said, well, when one of the gangs shoots a person in the other gang, you have to retaliate, because if not, you'll look weak. Okay, so this is the fundamental logic they're working on. So you have to retaliate, if not, you look weak. Well, what happens over here then is that, oh, they killed one of us now, we have to retaliate, because if not, we'll look weak. Okay, do you see the system that it's never gonna solve itself, it's just gonna kind of keep going? And that's the same as George and Linda, like, no, I'm right, well, no, you did this, but I did that, and that therefore I have to do this. It's the same thing, same process. And we basically explained what we just explained. We said, no, at some point, either here or here, a person had to realize that being weak is made up, and that you could kind of go past that thought and don't kill someone, all right? Now, and this sounded like a new idea to them, like, what do you mean? You can't really do that. But then we said we have to retaliate. Well, if you have to retaliate, we can't solve it, so why are we even talking about this? You know, so when people say, no, we can't really, it's not really solvable, it's not that simple, we kind of feel like, well, the only alternative is that somebody stops it. Somebody stops that circle, and the only way it stops is that one person have a realization that I could find goodwill regardless of how painful, hard, and difficult it is to do it. One person has to do it. And what happens then is that it stops the chain, and there's opportunity for something new to come, a new thought, a new direction, and a healthy spiral. Do you see that? And that's the same between extremely historical so-called truths that's basically just a history of thought. So if you look at history of what has happened often bound us now, like Linda said, she said, I count the fights we had, I remember them, and I use it against him later. Remember she said that? Well, countries do that. And we keep those stories around, and we also do it on any matter. And unless somebody are able to not forget, but not, how should I say it?
Go beyond.
Go beyond, not forget, but go beyond what happened. We will keep creating it. And the first person who's willing to go beyond the history of what has happened will immediately, as with George and Linda, find a new relationship. And that would solve all the stuff that we feel like we're stuck now because of the history that has happened. It would just solve it. Because it's the same with George and Linda as it would happen with apartheid, what happened with racial issues, what happened with the different wars. We have to be able to go beyond it. And you might say, that's extremely hard. It might be, but what helps us is that the mind is always trying to help us go beyond it. So this intelligence is trying to kind of point people to go beyond it. And that's what we want to talk about.
Well, and the interesting thing that I observed in George and Linda's story that we also observed in Dejan, the 16-year-old child of gang members in Chicago, is that there's an instant relief when human beings discover that they can feel better from within their own mind. Instant. It's really cool because, and you know this too, you know this in your own life, is that, I'm just going to use my words, but it sucks to feel like someone else is in charge of your feelings. It's the worst feeling ever. Like, if your spouse is responsible for your bad feeling, or in my case, before I learned these principles of the mind, I thought my father caused my bad feeling. And in Dejan's case, in Chicago, it's the other gangs cause our bad feeling. And it's the worst trap. And to Eirik's point, there's no exit. There's no exit strategy if other people are responsible for your feelings. And what was so cool in having that conversation with that 16-year-old in Chicago is the second he was kind of arguing with us, and then you saw this moment where his eyes kind of flickered. And he realized, oh my God, that's our way out. That's our way out of this hellish cycle that everyone hates. Nobody likes the feeling of it. It's not that these gang members want to continue the cycle of violence because somehow they're getting good feeling from it. It's because they think they have to do it. Because they don't know that they're trapped in a misunderstanding. And he had this moment, and it was really cool because he kind of looked at us when he realized, when Eirik said to him basically, look, if you realize that the feeling of weakness coming from the need to retaliate is totally made up, that's just a thought system you guys are trapped in, you could be the person to make up a new thought which said actually strength is not retaliating. Like, it had never dawned on him that you could have that thought. He had this moment where he saw it, and you could see this joy come over his face because he realized, oh my God, that's our way out. And he kind of mumbled it at first. He was like, I could do that.
Yeah.
And we were like,
I could bring that to the gangs. I could talk about this.
Yeah, we said, do what? And he said, I could be the one to talk to the gang members about this and show them that there's another way. Because nobody likes it. He was like, you think you have stress in your life. He's like, imagine waking up and walking around in the streets wondering when you're going to get shot. That's stressful. I was like, yeah, I don't have that in my life. Like, fortunately, my stress is things like, oh shit, I forgot to send that email yesterday. Like, my stress is very small in comparison to what you're describing. But he was like so overwhelmed by this sense of kind of joy and curiosity and the freedom that came with realizing, oh, we could change this by changing it from inside our own thinking. We're not trapped like we thought we are. And now it's been really cool to watch. We've been having conversations with him, and he's started having meetings with people in his community because he's connected to that community. Like, he's a part of, and he feels like he has the relationships in that community to start having those conversations to suggest that there's another way of thinking about it. But it always looks so crazy until it's kind of revealed, like I said, sort of just under our noses, that it really is a change in thought. It looks so complicated, it looks so much bigger and scarier and harder, but then when someone realizes, oh, we just have to change the thought we have around this. And that's as simple as having conversations with people, just like George and Linda had different conversations with each other, and they got over themselves, and they looked to have goodwill. This 16-year-old kid now is really interested in helping build goodwill in his community, and he didn't know that was possible before.
And he does it completely automatically after that thing. He can't not do it.
Yeah.
So after he saw that moment, he started, we didn't tell him. He went to his community. He also sends us pictures now like, oh, I just gave blood. He's so proud of giving and helping. I just gave
service to his community.
I just gave a homeless person some food, and he's like, he's grinning of proudness, and he's in like a totally different direction of how he can help, and all that is automatically happening once what he misunderstood disappeared. So it's the same version of what I said. When stuff disappeared from my mind, suddenly, automatically, I find myself doing different things. And that is, it might be a person here in this room that suddenly find themselves finding the solution to solve all the plastic waste. It happens in the same way. You're just like tracked in a new direction, and then solutions appear. But I love that. Before that, it was fear, retaliation, hatred, switch, automatically service. And that's automatically. He didn't, as Michael said, have to like, oh, how do I be of service, and no, he just did it. It's automatically, because he saw it from within. So we have 9 minutes. Do you want to riff some more, or should we ask from the...
Were you going to interview me or no?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Or do you want to ask the audience?
Oh, no, I can ask you more questions if you want.
Okay.
So, based on what we have said, if you were to answer like kind of almost 2 in 1 yourself, what you have seen in your work, I know this is 3 in 1, and how you see the world and the hope now. How does it look to you? How does the world look to you with this foundation?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest insight that I had personally that has grown in terms of my understanding of what would help the world, it's like Michael talked about, the kind of eureka screaming through the streets naked, to the dough, to the aha, like Linda said, all rolled into one, was when I learned that this was how my mind created my experience of life. Like I mentioned earlier, the biggest thing that cleared up for me was I stopped believing that other people caused my feelings. And I know that sounds maybe small to you, but it was huge to me. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've been confused about that. If I'm not confused about that, like so many things are possible in my life that weren't possible before. So I had been operating with one understanding. And it really was like, it meant there were certain people that made me feel bad, therefore I had to work really hard to kind of navigate around them. So there was a lot of time and energy that went into managing that understanding about life. Or there were certain things I didn't think I would ever be able to do. There were certain bad feeling states that I lived in that I had just kind of accepted, like your headache that you described. So there was a lot of stuff in my life that had made sense in that understanding that other people caused my feelings, that when I realized that's not the way the human system is designed, just dissolved. And in the dissolution of that came this freedom to feel anything in the face of anyone, to feel like I could go anywhere, no matter who was there or how they were behaving. And any circumstance or any environment suddenly became available to me. And to your point, when I started to feel better, I just behaved differently. So it was like this massive lubricant in my life. Like all of my relationships got smoother and easier, and where I could go and what I could do got smoother and easier, and I just felt better. And I think what's interesting is that if you look at what's going on in the world right now, it's totally trapped in that misunderstanding that things outside of us cause our feelings. And because of that, we have a lot of anywhere from mild to extreme dissatisfaction happening in people, and they're doing the best they can to coexist with that understanding, but it makes relationships hard, it makes building political structures hard, it makes living on a planet with 7 billion other people who have different thinking than us hard. Like all those complications that I had experienced in my life, I see as present in the world today, and it looks really clear to me because of how simple it was. Like all I had to have was one moment of insight where I realized, oh my God, I have the arrow pointed in the wrong direction. I think it's happening to me when in fact it's coming from me. And I didn't have to work hard to then become more compassionate or more caring about the world or more easy to deal with relationships. All of that was, as you said, just a natural fallout of a correction of a misunderstanding. So I feel like global change looks really simple to me right now. I feel like, yeah, actually all human conflict and kind of the greed that is in the world today, because we think we need to look after ourselves and we think we need X amount of money to feel good, and it's not logical, right? When we look at what's going on the planet, it's like, why does 1% of the world have more than the rest of the world combined? That doesn't make sense. There's no logic to it. The only way it makes sense is because there's sort of a misunderstanding in place right now where people are hoarding because there's this idea that somehow profit provides good feeling. And so there's people who are so profit driven and profit hungry, and it's like, no, that's not where your feelings come from. And similarly, the reverse is that if you people out there can't make me feel bad, then I don't have to defend myself against you. I don't have to worry about your belief system. I don't have to have you do and behave and be a certain way for me to feel good, so I don't have to protect myself against you, which in gangs and in terrorism and is what leads to one-on-one violence and mass violence. So it looks like, oh my God, if the one thing that got cleared up for me that made my life so much easier could be shared on a mass global scale, then I think so many of the world's problems would get cleared up. And so now I'm just curious, what are interesting, fun, creative, innovative ways in which you share an understanding that is frankly very simple and very easy to get because it's universal. I didn't make it up. I don't have to shove it down your throat. I don't have to try to convince you. All that had to happen for me was someone had to shine a light on it and go, wouldn't this make your life easier? And like we saw with that 16-year-old kid in Chicago, it's like once you even smell that there's an easier way, you just, it's like, yes, send me over there. That smells so much better than what I was doing before. So it really looks like an opportunity to provide a very simple solution to a lot of what the world is really, really struggling with right now.
And say more about how, what you see in your role in it, because I just know in the last conversation we had in this last year, we've seen, that change starts from within with us in a way, and that's the same with everybody here and everybody in the world. Could you say just something about that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because, thought is very sneaky. It's in there and we don't realize it's in there. So we're living with certain habits of thinking and we don't realize we're having them. And one of the habits of thinking that I had was, wouldn't it be great for the world if the world got better?
Yeah.
Somehow there was me, and then there was the world. It was like, meet my friend the world. My friend the world has lots of problems, and I'm over here doing the best I can with it. It was like somehow it was this separate entity. And there was just this kind of shift in the conversations that we had over the last year where I realized, oh, I am not separate from the world. I am the world. Like, I'm a player in the ecosystem of the world, and the degree to which I see that, then I'm more inclined to interact with it as though that's true. If I don't see that as true, I'm not going to interact with it as true. So I've suddenly just gotten really interested in, well, what are the things that I can do with my understanding, this understanding of the mind that has helped me so tremendously, to try to share that to help the world. And then what's interesting about the mind is ideas come about that. If you're interested and you look in that direction, then ideas come about that. So we've ended up going places and having conversations looking at some of these global systems that are in place and saying, how can we help introduce this understanding of the mind to help clear up some of those problems? Whether it's like the work that Jane is doing with trying to help aid workers, or whether it's the conversations we're starting to have with Chicago to reduce gang violence. It's anywhere you go in the world, if you see yourself as a participant in it, then it's easy to bring this understanding to that conversation. But that was new for me. Like, I didn't realize I had kind of put myself outside of it.
Yeah.
And so it's just been seeing myself as a part of the whole that's brought me to that conversation more.
Cool. Do we want to end on the...
Does anyone have a question that they want to ask? I've been told that Czech people are shy.
They don't
Are you
like
gonna
questions.
Are you gonna live up to your stereotype? Oh, we have one question over there. Can you wait 1 second? We'll get you a microphone because I can't actually hear you.
Thank you. I was asking, even if one of the sides makes that shift and stops the cycle, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that. I mean, it gives the room or the space for it to change, but unless both parties are eventually able to make that shift, it won't necessarily happen, right?
No, that's true, but it's still the only way.
Yeah,
So
at least it's a chance.
It is, yeah. At least there's a chance. It's still the only way, but we have a bunch of stories, both in couple organizations and in bigger. I know there's historical big things that have happened where one person had that shift and suddenly they get invited to a conversation like, what was that about? Because it does something with you. When you break a cycle, it's like a pattern interruption.
Yeah, it does something to you, for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, no, for the other person, they're like, what? You're not retaliating? No, like, and you just show love back, it does something to you.
It's like nonviolent communication.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's a side effect of this.
Right.
So I agree. Like, it just increases the chances tenfold. And sometimes, yeah, no, it doesn't work, but it's still the only way, which is why we feel like we have to do this at the source, and that's the way.
Okay, thank you.
And again, just to draw on my own personal experiences, is I've been so surprised how I used to think it takes two to tango. You know how they say that? But I'm realizing more and more, when I look to my own mind, when I change, it seems like the world changes. It doesn't take two to tango. For Mara, it takes Mara to tango. Like, I'm slowly
Because I don't
realizing.
even know how.
He's
so.
terrible at tango, no. But I've realized, like, when I've gotten over my bad feeling about someone from within my own mind, it's amazing to me how different they look to me. And they haven't even changed. I find that fascinating. And then, to Eirik's point, how they then respond to me because I'm being different, I see them differently. I mean, I think there's so much intriguing possibility and potential for humanity to consider. What if all it was a change in me? Because we're a bunch of me's walking around. I'm not a me who's also going to try to change you. Like, it feels tempting to want to do that, but the more I've looked in this direction, I've realized, oh my God, there is like infinite that I can see about my own capacity to change myself. And when I do that, it's amazing how much it seems like the world around me changes. And we just wanted to end on That last quote, because actually someone who interviewed me for a podcast a month or so ago just sent me this quote today and said, have you ever seen this Einstein quote? I was thinking about our interview, and I thought, well, this would be something really cool to share with the group to end on. So I'll let you read it.
And to that last question, I think the last sentence answer parts of it. It's like nobody's able to achieve this completely, but striving for such achievement is itself a part of liberation, a foundation of inner security. It's kind of the same. Like, we're not saying it's going to create a perfect world, but it's still, worth a shot.
And that foundation of inner security rippled out among 7 billion people is what global security looks like. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just leave it.